Hey, welcome to Web3 Weekly with your host, Blockstar Technology.
Let's go.
Alrighty. Good afternoon, everyone. So here today we having our 11th episode of our weekly podcast. So we are live on Instagram live and we are live on Twitter Spaces as well. And by the way, this also get recorded for our weekly podcast as well. So today we're going to talk about something very special. It's about digital assets. And today we have invited a very knowledgeable Liam Hennessy. So Liam, just to give you a little bit of background about you, I'm pretty sure that myself and Charlie, we met you at the Something Digital, and you did a masterclass, and we were really impressed by how you delivered it, and you really judged the audience well, and you really brought them on that journey. So before we get into today's podcast, Liam, can you please give us a little bit about background about yourself, please?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate that, guys. I'm delighted to be here. My background. So I have been practicing financial services regulatory law for about 17 years in Sydney, Melbourne, London, now Brisbane. And against that backdrop, we have quite a large practice here in Brisbane of about 30 different team members, and we assist banks and funds and insurers and exchanges and a whole range of other sort of people in the financial services industry with their regulatory needs and in interfacing with regulators. A number of years ago now, we started working for some crypto-based startups. And from there, we now service the needs of a large portion of the crypto industry, all the way from exchanges to funds to developers to really people across the spectrum. And it's fantastically interesting from a financial services regulatory lawyer's perspective, because we get to advise on all of the licensing, the product design, and really get to see what we believe here at Gadens is really the architecture for the next, coming decades, really, of both the financial services system and the broader economy. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liam. Cool. Before we get into it, can you please tell us on Spaces, can you please tell us whether you can hear us okay? Thumbs up or anything would work, or love hearts. I always like the love hearts. All right, nothing. I'm not seeing anything here. Are we? Okay, yep. Thank you, Codex.
We got a thumbs
Cool.
up and a love heart.
Codex is back.
Yeah.
Codex is back. So, thank you guys. Thank you for letting us know. Alrighty. So, let's dive into it. Hey. So we're going to talk about today. We had the draft bill.
Yes.
So that's what we're going to talk about. We'll touch base on that, what that really means to us on the blockchain, the Web3 space. The space is moving so fast that even ourselves who are living and breathing this space, keeping up with it is difficult. And so I want to bring some empathy to the politicians or the government agencies or the other industries and policymakers who might not be living in this space like 24/7 like us. And this is all about a discussion and bringing some valid points onto the table and discussing on that, and how, because end of the day, last thing we want is, we don't want to kill innovation. We want to support innovation, but it has to work both ways, and we are discussing points that would support innovation plus the policy as well. What is the happy medium that for all of us? So on that point, let's get started. So
Well, I for one actually think it's fantastic that Australia is making the attempt to bring in regulation, and they're starting to consider it. They understand that this technology is here, it's here to stay, And I think for the last however many years, since 2009, people have always known that it has been the wild, wild west up until recently. And we do need, as much as it is annoying, we do need regulations to get consumers involved safely.
Yeah.
So, and I think this bill is a good start, and obviously nothing's perfect. And Liam, I love a lot of your points of feedback. I strongly agree with a lot of them. And this bill is essentially a licensing regime. And what are your views? We'll chuck some questions back to you. I know that it's a licensing regime and it's split into 3 categories for digital asset exchanges, digital asset custodians, and stablecoin issuers. So,
Yeah, thanks.
yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Maureen. Look, I completely agree with you. Crypto has been largely unregulated and remains largely unregulated up till this point. There are a large number of people who I think in the far distant past may have thought that that's a good idea, but we're at such a mainstream point now where you have large financial institutions like Goldman Sachs or ANZ, piloting digital asset projects. You have, our Reserve Bank with digital asset projects, that I think we all agree that some level of regulation is a very good thing, both for the businesses itself, like Blockstars, in order to build with the certainty of the regulatory environment and to go within the confines of the law, and with the consumers as well in terms of the protection. So we do need a form of regulation, and I agree with Maureen that the BRAC bill is a start in the right direction. I guess now the bigger question is, once we accept that we need regulation, what should that regulation look like?
Yeah.
And that is a really fascinating point, which I guess we're going to get into today.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like we discussed the other day, Liam, that Australia is renowned for red tape regulation in an attempt to keep everyone safe. They often do overdo it, and that, can sometimes have inadvertently affect innovation and, being able to compete on a global scale. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I think that our policymakers historically have never seen a problem that they didn't want to be fixed with a new piece of legislation.
Yeah.
And that's just not always the answer. We're in a bit of a strange circumstance here whereby the current government is engaged in this very large token mapping exercise whereby they're going to complete a taxonomy of about 21,000 different tokens, which is fantastic and great. And I'm fully supportive of that project, but not at the expense of creating some licensing or other regulation, which is where we really need. Enter Senator Andrew Bragg from the opposition government at this point in time. So he doesn't have the numbers, his party doesn't have the numbers to push regulation through, but he is focused in the right areas in terms of licensing this part of the market. And he has come up with a piece of legislation which has closer consultation and which we got your help with, Maureen, and team earlier in the week. So I guess that's the current plan. Before going, my overarching thoughts on that piece of legislation is that while it is the right direction, it's far too broad at this point in time.
Yeah.
I think if it was to be passed, I think that our friends over in the US and the EU would potentially have a competitive advantage over us.
Yep, 100%. Like when you talk about the digital assets, right? We always, sort of meddled with the idea like what is a digital asset, and I think in a way that the bill kind of puts some definition in there what a digital asset is, and just be on chain, and it is it's cryptographically should be verified, and that adds a little bit more clarity in that sense, because initially when we heard about this bill, what's being done, I was like, oh my god, is it going to change the in-game assets or ebooks?
Well, in-game assets will still get covered if it's on the blockchain, according to the
Like in
current
the new,
definition.
yes, new exactly for the new games, right?
so-
Things like that. But in this space, the way I looked at it is like, say, if you thought about how the web was created, if Tim Berners-Lee or someone like, if they patented or if they created those legislation when they initially, what type of internet would we be using today? You know, and likewise with penicillin, you know, all that. I'm just looking at that, and I understand there's a little bit of give and take in here.
Yeah.
And given the space is like constantly like CBDC, like what China is bringing in, right? I think there's a big, you know, not, I don't know the concern, but they're obviously, far, forward than where we are, but that comes with some degree of national security risk factors and everything else, right? What do you guys think, Charlie?
Yeah, going back to your thought, it's sort of like email to a decentralized platform. Like you've got your centralized platforms, you've got your decentralized platforms. I'm all for bringing in, I don't know how they would do it exactly, but bringing in licenses for the centralized platforms or the centralized hedge funds as such. But then I'm also on the decentralized side where let people innovate, let people create, have that decentralized ecosystem and let it be. But when it comes into, like as we've seen, there's many exchanges, they have a front end, they control all your assets, it's under their wallets, and they can close shop and keep everything. Where in the decentralized world, when you're in your self-custodial wallet, it depends if you don't read that contract, which MetaMask has done beautifully this year and updated the warnings of connecting to those sites for people that don't know the code exactly. But that's how I'd see it, that centralized business of a centralized crypto exchange, like maybe a Binance or a CoinSpot. Yeah, maybe some licensing there just to protect consumers. But then when you come into like maybe an OpenSea, where it's everybody self-manages all their assets and it's just a marketplace, or a Uniswap where people are creating liquidity pools and people are innovating, I would prefer to see that stuff be left alone. And it's sort of like the old tale of you fall off your bike the first time, you get back up and you keep riding, and you fall over a couple more times until you learn how to ride, until you learn how to ride the bike. And yeah, that's
so. Liam, jump in if you want, my friend. So
Yeah, I agree, but probably from a different angle. When I think of regulation in this sense, I think from the products themselves backwards. So the starting point for me is, let's take a token. What does it actually do from a functional perspective? Is the token acting a bit like a derivative, in which case, by and large, across the world, we decide the derivative should have a license attached to them because of the complication and risk profile. So sure, a token that acts like a derivative, let's treat it like a financial product. Does a token act like a funds management product, whereby we pool resources through an equity-based structure and some third party invests them? Again, the complication and the risk profile in that product, sure, I think it is. So completely fine from our perspective for those tokens that function as derivatives and managed investment scheme products to be regulated as financial products. But where those tokens are NFTs for, say, artwork or music or gold bullion, that's not really a financial product. Where those tokens are utility tokens for the governance of a particular blockchain asset, that really isn't a financial product. And to put the weight of the full financial services regime on top of those tokens and require it to have a license really is hard work. To give you a stark example at the moment, any tokens that you minted with your business for all of your customers, notwithstanding that they're NFTs to represent Bored Apes or some other piece of artwork or music, someone would need a license from ASIC to do that. That's how broad the current definition in the legislation is.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel very nuanced to me, I guess, at this stage. And that's been our big point in coming back to Senator Bragg and his submission.
Yeah. So, Liam, I'm not sure if you know, but do you know much about Nouns DAO?
You're going to have to educate me.
So Nouns DAO is they have an auction every day. It's all run through smart contracts, so it's self-executing. And what happens is they're going for quite a bit of ETH, nounsdao.wtf. But what happens with the Nouns DAO is it's an NFT, and people bid on the Nouns DAO, and majority of those funds that from the winning bid gets locked into a treasury. So the wrapped ETH gets locked into a treasury, and then all the people that are holding those Nouns DAO get to vote on the governance of how that treasury spends those funds. What would you see that as, coming from the financial market background?
Liam's smiling.
Because that's sort of where I come into. That's decentralized, it's executed in a smart contract, people are voting, but there is the treasury model there that are holding everyone's funds, but everybody's got to vote.
Great question, Charlie.
I think that is a fascinating factual scenario, and in a word, complicated. Just to give you an idea, and I will flesh that answer out, but in my sort of TradFi practice, we spend so much of our time advising people on what is and isn't a financial product, completely outside of the world of crypto, just because the definitions are so broad. So, in this context, a managed investment scheme, which is essentially a fund, requires a financial services license. All you have to do to create a managed investment scheme is to have a bunch of different people contribute money or money's worth to a singular area, and then a separate person manages that wealth for them, independently of those other people. So immediately when you start talking about a token ecosystem whereby people are investing their monies and someone else is figuring out where that goes, that to me says that the first idea should be managed investment scheme. I don't know enough about that particular one, and if they are voting on it, that could mitigate it, because that to me seems like there is some level of control over where those funds are going. It's a bit more of a democratised system. But I think in a roundabout way, and sorry to give you a lawyer's answer, that comes back to a pretty factually complicated scenario that we then need to run a whole lot of law over the top of. And that's the complication here in all of this. We need to have a bit more certainty so that people who are operating those systems know, the bounds in which, it's okay to operate and not operate.
That's that's the thing is right. I mean, like, even when you look at the whole the yield farming, I was looking at it over the last week or so, like really getting my head into that space, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, look, if it's all run by smart contracts and you're investing in the code, it's the code that get executed, right? There's no intermediaries in there when you're doing those yield farming on a decentralized, platform. And then you got other APIs as well, like the other platforms like Aave and, Compound and all that as well. Somewhat centralized, somewhat decentralized. And when you cross over from centralized to decentralized platform, and then you keep on looping back those funds, at which point do you get,
liquidated?
Yeah, right? I don't know, right? So it's a whole different ball game as soon as you go from centralized to decentralized and coming back into that, and then using those funds to get cycled through. Now with
it's even like MakerDAO, which has been around for many years. The only decentralized stablecoin out there at the moment that I know of, where you lock your crypto up and you get the equivalent in DAI, which is the stablecoin, and you can go use that, and then you've got to come pay it back.
Yeah.
Where it mitigates the whole banking system. It becomes its own decentralized bank with the maker token being able to vote on proposals of interest rates as well. And how does that come in? But we've got to remember, these might be decentralized in the smart contract.
Yes.
But there's that front end website that people are interacting with. Not everyone's going and interacting through
the smart contract
or the smart contract through Remix as such. There's that front end centralization. They might not control everything because it's all run through smart contracts, but they're hosting that website
on a centralized platform.
Yeah.
So we need like a IPFS, hosting platform. I mean, that's the things like at that point, who do you, if the smart contracts, right, on a decentralized platform, and then you have the front end, so does it mean the person who runs that centralized front end, the user interface, they need a license because they're just plugging into a smart contract that sits, they've got nothing to do with it. They're just like being the intermediary here.
I guess that would come down to how they were providing that access. Like if it was a custodial wallet, for example, then they would be managing those assets on behalf of the consumers, and therefore I believe would require a license. And in those sort of circumstances, I certainly think there should be consumer protection.
Yes.
But I certainly agree with Charlie. There needs to be consumer protection in there for that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But again, if you want to be your own bank, which it's not easy to be your own bank, is it, Charlie?
Can't be your own stock market with liquidity pools.
That is exactly right. So if it's yours and you decide to risk it, then I think that's on you. But yeah, certainly if you're putting it in somewhere where it's being managed, handled, or
you create that happy medium. So there's still the innovation that's happening now, but then there's not those centralized exchanges like what's the Netflix documentary, the Quadriga, the Canadian exchange that disappeared, had the private keys all to himself, a whole heap of money missing.
Passed away in
India.
Yeah. So
are you suggesting that people should have a choice whether they accept regulation and go a safe route, or they have a choice to gamble and do a decentralized system? Because
I don't have the perfect answer, but I believe there does need to be somewhat regulation in the centralized market of crypto and making sure the assets are there. And I don't know exactly how that would look or go. Liam would probably have a better idea, but I do believe they need to leave that decentralized smart contract innovation going. I've seen the innovation happen with open source technology over the years, even GitHub Copilot.
Copilot, that's
going open source to get as much information for their AI, and you don't stifle that innovation of people building. That's how Uniswap come about. We've had talks in the office of Hayden Adams. So Hayden Adams created Uniswap, Liam. I'm not too sure if you know about that. It's the decentralized exchange. So if it was 5 years ago and someone come in going, I want to build this exchange. It requires no KYC. People create liquidity pools on pairs. Each side would go, we don't know about this legally. But since Uniswap has come out, you come to the 3 years later, and it's sort of common knowing what a decentralized exchange is, and we would be more acceptable about it. But making that first mover would be
very,
for us, we would have to really sit down and weed out what exactly it is. And with no KYC, I don't, we don't know. But
to switch sides of the fence just briefly, that's a really good point, because the liquidity pool. So I guess what I'm saying is, when looking at NFTs, like I said, we all, I think we agreed here that it needs to have more granularity in what they're doing to cover those aspects. And part of that should cover this. But you've got to remember that every time you create that liquidity pool on Uniswap, that liquidity pool is an NFT.
Now it is, since V3
Since
came
V3,
out,
that's
you've
right.
actually got where you can sell that whole liquidity pool of your funds.
So the NFT is actually holding the assets, which, adds a whole nother level of complexity.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And every 4 years, this market just gets more complex and there's new innovation, and
Yeah.
that's what I'd like to see not be stifled. But
Yeah.
I've seen enough centralized exchanges go down and take people's money that
Yeah.
Yeah.
there needs to be something there. I don't
Absolutely.
know how it gets drafted or built, but
Yeah, sorry.
no, go Maureen.
No, just on that point, I actually do. One of the points of the bill, I do agree with the segregation of customer funds, obviously, so they're not tied up with corporate funds. Because on that point, we have seen a number of exchanges go bankrupt and people having lost significant money for that reason. So I do like his points in relation to, stable coins and having a minimum requirement. Reserve
Maybe locked
require-
up, yes, and
Yeah.
then annual reviews as well with ASIC. It's not APRA, but ASIC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I've been hearing there as well, coming from my decentralized background, is they want, from what I've been hearing, is they want the stable coins to be backed 1-to-1.
1-to-1, yeah.
Yeah.
But our Federal Reserve's not backed 1-to-1. They're not transparent. You know, we live on
Yeah.
fractional banking where the bank only needs 10% of funds to borrow out. They can print the other 90%. The Federal Reserves can just go printing money as much as they want in any disaster.
Yeah, double standards, isn't it?
Well, if I print money, it's called money counterfeiting, and I'd go to jail for 10,
Yeah.
20
But you
years.
can mint more tokens.
But like, I guess I guess adjacent to that or up against it. Each time I look at this, I'll think I have the way I'd fall on which side of the argument in my head. And then I stop and think, like, okay, so exactly what you're saying there, why do they have to have that 1-to-1, right? And all of a sudden I'm thinking, okay, so what if the superannuation company that looks after all of my retirement all of a sudden decides, we're going to chuck it all in a stable coin, not that you'd be making a lot of money on it, it's not a perfect
10%
example,
APY
but if that's
there,
not
right?
backed, do you know what I mean? It's like, hang on a minute, I don't know that I want you to take that risk.
Yeah,
with my money that way, which is why you need those consumer
But if
protections.
like you see in third world countries especially, something goes wrong, they go to the bank to get their money out into cash.
Yeah.
And, sorry, we've closed the banks, you can't get any money because they've run out.
I'm
because
sorry,
there's
we put it all in Luna.
It's all
Yeah.
a digital.
Liam, what are your thoughts? We'd love for you to jump in. Sorry, we get carried away talking, so go ahead.
Just please interrupt.
You jump in at
jump
any
in,
time.
Look, I think, at the current point in time, the legislation we have is a great step forward insofar as it proposes some regulation, but exactly coming back to your initial point, Maureen, there needs to be more granularity. Should all of the NFTs and stable coins and other any sort of token be regulated like a financial product? I don't think so. I think let's pick out the ones that actually taxonomically bear the same sort of resemblance to existing financial products and regulate them so that we can free up the rest of the digital assets market for that innovation. When it comes to CBDCs, I think that they just have the most amazing potential, and I don't have a particular view on stable coins and e-money and one-to-one ratios and so forth. I do note that our legislation here doesn't place the same sort of restrictions on stable coins that other areas do. So in the US, for example, a stable coin can only be denominated in the US dollar. In the EU, they allow them to be denominated in EU, or they allow them to be denominated in EU and other currencies. But if you're trading over something like 200 million in anything other than EU coins, there's a penalty to pay. In Australia, we're happy, that they're backed by any other currency. So it could be, third world currencies, which have a lot more volatility than say the Australian dollar and will accept it as a stable coin. I don't know, maybe that should get looked at. But when it does come back, well, some digital assets can be relatively volatile themselves. If you're backing them with an emerging currency which is volatile in and of itself,
Yes.
Yeah.
that's a fair amount of risk. So I'm not quite sure the level of tweaking has been done on that one yet. I mean, what I love about central bank digital currencies, and leaving aside all of the metrics that come into macroeconomic sort of theory, is what's been happening in, say, the Bahamas or other sort of areas that have adopted digital currency pilots. They have large portions of their population which are debanked. They don't have access to banking system because they don't have, the KYC documents, or they don't have branches or otherwise. All these people need to do is to have an Ether wallet, and suddenly their central bank can put a whole lot of tokens in their Ether wallet following a natural disaster that they can use then to buy food and other items to support their families. That is a direct interface in between central banks and the neediest people in our societies. Imagine if we could do the same sort of thing for those pockets in Australia that are really debanked or underprivileged, in sort of remote areas. I just think the potential for that is a really wonderful thing.
Yeah,
That's a great point.
I mean, we spoke about this.
We did.
We spoke about this maybe
2 weeks
2 weeks ago.
was it?
I think so, something like that. It's great that you mentioned
Yeah,
that.
because we thought okay, look, if they leave without all that, if they go to one of those camps, they're not going to carry their driver's license. That's their last thing in their mind,
Yeah.
And that the CBDC in that side of the crisis and charities, and we can really see the transparency. That's where, and that would really work. And how would that get?
Well, that's not just CBDC down to retail, but also down to obviously retail consumer. So I guess my question is, should this at least be looked at, where we've got the CBDC, and at the moment I think they're trying to back out of it, going down as far as retail, but we're talking the top end of town.
Yeah, wholesale
for
side,
large transfers and things like that. And then with the licensing and stuff like that's been proposed, and like I said, it's not bad. Like some of it's actually good, but how much of this is, I guess, to stop that debanking, like to protect the banks in their current form?
Yeah,
that would be my question.
Yeah,
Who really knows the answer to that?
that's
But you know what I mean? Like it's certainly something worth considering.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to push your CBDC all the way down to retail, right? So you're not disintermediating the banks, then how do you stop everybody else doing what the banks are doing with this? And obviously, consumer protection aside, licensing is the answer.
Yeah, licensing is the answer.
And I think I see the power of a CBDC. I also see the bad power of CBDC. Like,
Yes.
if Australia's good now, like, hey, Germany was good before World War II, you know what I mean? And then you get someone in power and they've got that much control and they can just change legislation or laws on the whim. The majority of people are already stuck in there, and obviously that's a big concern in the crypto community too, with that coming forward. But I run my own business a few years back, Liam, and the best thing about CBDC, as I can see, if it come to retail, is automatic GST payments. My GST goes straight back to the tax department. When I go pay at McDonald's or fuel station, that GST goes straight back, and I ain't got to do no bookkeeping for it.
I've never heard someone so cheery to pay tax, but okay.
If you're making money, you got to pay tax.
I just want to put a disclaimer here. There's no legal,
No legal
advice, and there's no financial advice. This discussion, we are just discussing this. Please do not take this as this is the legal standing. It's not. We are just discussing the draft bill. It's not even finalized yet. We're just it's a draft bill.
Yeah.
So that's what we are discussing here.
We're just putting on everyone's radar because I think it's really important when someone calls for responses and submissions, you need to understand the reach and the effect that these things can have. Like we said, inadvertently, they're so broad that they capture other tokens or other things just under their wing. And at the moment, everyone that's listening is in the Web3 space, and digital asset has been defined so broad that it could essentially affect a lot more than what it's intended to. So I think it's really important when they have something like this that they get opinions from a lot of different backgrounds that are involved, not just the financial, not just the legal, but the technical points of view as well. And I think you raised a number of really great points, Charlie, that they hadn't considered because of things such as art and music and
NFTs are such a diverse mix.
Yeah.
You know?
that's right.
You
I
can-
really support that view, Maureen. I mean, there's that sale that, that saying that all it takes for evil to flourish is, good people to stand by and do nothing. And,
Yes, I love that.
it's not directly transferable to this, but all it needs for these bad, for laws that, if not bad, aren't as supportive as the industry needs to get pushed through, is for people in the Web3 community to say, oh, look, I'd really like to contribute to this, but it's just a bit of a pain right now, so I'll let it go through. And before you know it, you've stuck with these pieces of legislation that, they may be good, they may be bad, but most likely they'll be middling. So this is the time and the place to do that advocacy.
And I agree. I think now's the time to act, because you can't leave stuff like this for everyone else to deal with. Like, I think that we all have to take it on ourselves to be a part of this, to play a role. This is essentially the future, and it's going to affect us, if not now, then later, without a doubt. So I think that, like you said, Liam, it's up to everyone that's in the space to really consider these things, to stand back and see, like, even people with the best intentions that have applied laws, what started as good can always be used as bad if we're not careful. So I think that people such as yourself, other people out there that took the time to, like, write in submissions, took the time to point the dangers of, some of the broad aspects and what could be changed, it is really important for this space. And I'd encourage anyone that's listening at the moment, either now or later, to go take a look. And if you think you have anything valuable to contribute, take some time and write in and, provide a submission, talk to some people, let's start a consortium and get people together. We might even do a panel and invite some expert speakers on and, put our heads together to shape the future the way that it needs to be shaped. So Liam, what are some of the, just to continue on the topic, what are some of the areas that you saw personally that you thought, could definitely be improved or adjusted?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, you use that definition of digital asset. It's far too broad. You go over to the US and they've broken it down into securities, commodities and utility tokens. You go to the EU and they've done much the same thing with different categories. Having spoken on that one and the consequences of it, I guess to my mind, the digital assets bill in Australia is 35 pages, if I printed it out. I go over to the EU, it is something like 340 pages. I go to the US, it's something like 200 pages. That's a pretty cheap way of pointing out that this bill leaves a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of the muscle to future regulations. And look, there's nothing wrong with making legislation and saying there's going to be some secondary rules that will come out and give a bit further detail. But at the current point in time, this legislation is just so broad that were you and I, Maureen, to give advice to businesses on it, it'd be a little bit tricky for us given how broad it is. There's not enough detail in it. So I think the secondary draft of the bill needs to contain a hell of a lot more granularity on it. Let's talk about those stablecoin ratios. Let's talk about the capital that you need to set aside in Australia. Let's talk about, for example, the bill talks about having fair and orderly crypto markets. What is a fair and orderly crypto market?
It was like
number only goes up.
Last year in November it was 3 trillion, but today it's like 1 trillion, right? Just like exactly. I mean, it's like a bit crazy, right?
Well, I think what I've been waiting for many years in the crypto market is for the institutional investors to be able to get in, the hedge funds being able to get in, like in America where 401ks can get in, super funds, which then increases that market cap of maybe, the top couple of coins that will stay over time. The more money that's in there will stabilize, like gold at the moment is, I believe, gold on itself is 14 trillion, where 2-3 years ago the total market cap in crypto was only like 400 billion. So you can, those numbers can shift dramatically with those low market caps being involved, and also being in a decentralized environment, and a lot of people with holding a lot of funds being able to swing stuff in ways with relatively small amounts of money.
That's it. I think that's the thing is right, Sorry, go ahead, Liam.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just have to wonder, and this is probably my third point with the bill, is there seems to be a lot of issues during the consultation that happened when Bragg's team was in government that haven't been taken up. If I'm imposing upon the exchanges in Australia, so we have so many fantastic exchanges in Australia. They're really world leading with their safety and security and product offering.
Yeah.
The closest thing you could compare them to in a traditional sense is just a foreign currency exchange, where you exchange US dollars for Australian dollars and so on and so forth. Yeah. Now, those exchanges do not have any obligation to mandate fair and orderly markets. That is a stock exchange obligation. That is something, and we only have like 15 stock exchanges in Australia. If you are applying a stock exchange obligation, which is really difficult, so the ASX stops trading when some equities bounce around too much and where they think there might be market manipulation. So if you're applying that level of regulation onto what is an exchange, that to me seems a little bit onerous. I don't think that we'd ever go to a MoneyGram or an OFX or anyone like that and say, well, look, the pound's doing something pretty interesting at this point in time. You might just want to stop trading.
And we've seen that recently.
That is exactly what is happening here. So I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that concept, and I guess that sort of leads into my third point. Do we really need new licenses for this? Do we, we've got AFSLs, we've got ACLs, we've got prudential licenses. Can we work with what we've got and modify them? Can we pick up some of the ideas of the consultation, I guess, and see if we can tweak them rather than creating new licenses and putting new obligations on top of businesses? That's, I guess, another sense I have in terms of the legislation.
So,
we've seen that with the bit license in New York many years ago. It was actually more regulated in the traditional markets because they needed traditional market licensing, plus the bit licensing, and a lot of people left in New York back in the day around Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think they killed it. They killed New York by doing that. Really, the innovation. I think that's other parts of US like really thrive. Where for New York, it was bad.
Yeah,
and that is exactly the risk of over-regulation. It's a balancing act. So in terms of moving forward, Liam, what do you think? I mean, obviously no one's perfect, but it's always good to chuck out options and solutions. In moving forward, what do you recommend? Do you think that we should maybe perhaps just engage in our existing structure and continue to see where it goes, or should we slowly implement, the bare minimum in terms of maybe, exchanges and, customer segregation of funds? Should we leave it as it is? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and really the $64,000 one.
Yeah.
My personal preference. Look, I do think we need regulatory certainty, and I'm of a mind that we take an exceptionally granular approach to tokens. Those of them which function and operate as securities, I think that we modify the AFSL regime. Those of them which do not, I think that we apply a level of regulation, but something far less than currently is proposed on them, because innovation shouldn't be stifled. And those ones which, maybe utility tokens or something else of that nature, that they really don't need to take up our regulators' time and attention, because they're not there for investment. They're there for a functional purpose.
Yeah.
So I guess I'd like to see us move in the direction of the EU's MICA bill and see us carve up crypto assets into 5+ different categories and regulate them accordingly. I'd also like to see our legislation contain some of the incentives that I see in other parts of the world. So the US, for example, God bless them, in terms of supporting innovation, have tax-free thresholds for crypto tokens that operate like currencies. So ones that operate like currencies that are being used for payments, tax-free, under $200. This is going to be using those ones. They have tax-free incentives for entrepreneurs to set up there. I think that is an absolutely wonderful idea.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd like to see our local ecosystem get supported in that way as well.
Yeah.
It's a great idea. Oh, sorry.
I've got a question for you, Liam, and Maureen too. Once legislation comes in, is it very hard to change in our current laws? Like once the legislation is set, it's fairly hard to change, isn't it? They like to keep it there. Where we know the crypto market, like in blockchain, crypto, Web3, we're living in dog years. Like there's that much innovation.
Yeah.
Is there a new model that they need to adapt to this actual industry?
Like where you can upgrade.
The problem is, as Liam knows, legislation often lags. And when they apply a new legislation, they like to, give it time to see how it's working. And sometimes the damage is done in the interim. So some of these things that go under during that time, just for their trial and error, like we don't want to have to wait and sort of pick up the pieces just because it wasn't considered at the time. What do you think, Liam?
Completely agree with you. Look, Web3 is new, it's exciting, it's a little bit scary, it's complex. It's really complex, right? And you can feel that what I wouldn't want to see is policymakers who are a little bit scared of all of these concepts and the metaverse and everything else like that. Make legislation right now that is so hard to change, that is really defensive or insecure in nature. We want our legislation to support our industry because it is precisely so hard to change and because the damage is done in the interim while it's there. Which really comes back to Maureen, your point earlier on, insofar as the whole Web3 community, in an appropriate, respectful and intelligent way needs to engage with our policymakers and say, hey, use us, we're here, we can help.
I really think that's a big thing. Like in moving forward, I really think that they need to engage with the actual users, people that are in the space, people that are technically minded and have the understanding, because I think their strength lies in perhaps writing and creating policy, but they lack, and to no fault of their own, because a lot of us do, the technical understanding of the effect that these suggested, regulation could potentially have in this space.
Yeah, look, let's not forget about Blockchain Australia, right? They are doing some
they're doing some great work.
some good panels. They're bringing people together, having some good discussions there as well, and we have to applaud them as well. There are quite a few people out there like leading in this space, and it's fantastic. And and Codex, as rightly mentioned, the time that was the use cases for the RBA, the open, I think it's about 3 months or something like that, or such a short time, right? It almost like they just we got however number of things. We submitted 2 use cases with regards to the construction and the development side of things, and I wish they let it open for a little bit longer so that we could get a few other use cases. And they're going to trial some test CBDCs, and they're going to burn it afterwards after the trial period and things like that. So look, there's quite a few things happening, and I know that we can't solve everything. I'm so aware of the time with regards to everyone on this call. We are approaching 1 hour now. Go ahead, Charlie.
I've got one question. So Liam, do you see in Australia, I guess Australia is very short on their bill, but overseas, are they taking into account the actual blockchains and their consensus mechanisms because they change broadly as well? in themselves.
From mining to staking to
Mining,
proof of
staking, proof of authority. Some are running 6 nodes, some are running 1 node.
Guys, they're not even anywhere. Look, I'm going to read you the definition. That level of detail and expertise, is stuff that you've together we've got to get to Canberra, because the current digital assets definition is this. Digital asset, and I'm quoting here, it means a digital representation of value or rights, including rights to property, the ownership of which is evidenced cryptographically and that is held or transferred electronically by a type of distributed ledger technology or another distributed cryptographically verifiable data structure. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
That level of granularity that you just mentioned.
They're not even thinking about it at this stage.
I think one of the important things for them to understand that Web3 is a lot of it's about the community, and the community's there, and I'm sure quite willing to put their hand up and make suggestions, answer questions, and be there to pass on any knowledge that's required.
We certain, probably they did, consult, but I think one thing out of this session, the podcast, what we're expecting is we have, get in touch with, the minister's office and reach out to them and, let's, maybe have a panel discussion and something that, that we can have some more, little bit more dive deep into it. Q&A session. I'm pretty sure that who's on these even spaces, and even once they hear or listen to the podcast, it might spark some ideas for them as well. Like, oh, you know what, I want to ask this question, so we can have a set of questions, and out of that, who knows what will come out. I think more brains in this space is super important. Like I'll just circle back to summarize what you mentioned as well, Maureen, about what we discussed. It's like, I feel like, this is like when they discuss about printing money, it was like super centralized. And now I think as people in this tech space, I think we got an opportunity to raise concerns and ask questions. And there's so much of work that's, being done by the innovators. I think there's policymakers can really use the knowledge of that, even this is like more tech driven first. Like it's tech first, not policy first. I think that's the difference, right? And I think,
I think it's also a great opportunity for us to put it on the radar for people that are listening, for people that tune in case people weren't aware. But this is now an opportunity for people to go back, read the bill, check out the bill, look at some of the submissions, and we might, do a second follow-up podcast where we get Liam on, where we get Senator Andrew on, where we get anyone that is technically minded on, and we have like a big proper debate, discussion, and talk about, once we've had given other people the opportunity to read it, get across it, consider other consider the way other places are doing it in the world, and then come back together, put our heads together and look at what we can do in moving forward to improve it, and what we can do to remove the risk of damaging an industry that could blossom into something great.
Cool. Any closing notes from you, Liam?
No, I think Maureen put it better than I could.
Maureen always does.
Thanks, guys.
Craig?
No, I'm covered. Like I said, I think there's, as with everybody else, there's a lot to digest.
Yes.
And there's a lot to consider. But, I would urge everybody to dive in and at least have a look.
We'll definitely have a follow-up, I think.
100%.
Yeah.
And from me, what we've gathered from this, and I'd say the listeners as well, is we still need to educate. Like there's a lot of people in our industry we're working with that we're educating, but we also got to remember the policymakers also need help in education in this and everything that's going on. And that's it from me. If anyone wants to find Liam, Liam Hennessy on LinkedIn, and get in contact with your opinions.
I mean, we have a thing from Codex with 5 minutes to go. And while I have a massive range of opinions based on my work/experience, I'll add this as it hasn't been touched on. Section 27, 5 plus the AA Act 2018 equals danger, Will Robinson. So Codex, thank you for that. And I think this is only the beginning. I'm pretty sure we're going to circle back to these discussions, given that the space is moving so fast. I think, once a month or something like that, I think we can really bring in some people with some questions and we can discuss, really do a deep dive.
We'll give you guys some notice next time to get your questions together. I think Codex probably will want to jump in next time. I'm sure there's a couple of other listeners that would have loved to. This was very last minute, but I think next time we'll give you guys some notice and people some opportunity to, put their heads together.
Yeah. I mean, every sort of Wednesday come around every 7 days. So but thank you so much, Liam. Thank you for your time, and really, we greatly appreciate your time and your knowledge, and and coming to share your knowledge with everyone, with the audience, with us. And I'm a lot smarter now than an hour ago. So
me just a little bit.
It's a pleasure to speak with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liam.
And thanks everyone listening.
And thank you, Instagram Live. And we'll put some information. We'll give more information about Liam and his service and his company as well, so that if you have any questions or anything that running for business, financial side of things, you can always contact
or if you want to put forth something, you read something in that bill, get in contact with him and share it along, and he's a great guy.
And tune in to our next follow-up episode, because I'm sure there'll definitely be a follow-up. So plan ahead.
Cool. Awesome.
See you guys.
Actually, before we go,
wait, our meetup.
Meetup.
Oh my god, our meetup, you guys.
All right, Maureen, go for it.
All right, guys, listen up. We are having our 3rd monthly meetup, and this time we are going large. We have the penthouse booked out for it, which means it's going to be a sick time. We have education.
Maureen? What penthouse?
It's at the Island Rooftop in Surfers Paradise. We're going to have food, drinks, education, entertainment, and just good times, good laughs, good people. So we hope to see you all there. Bring your friends, bring your family, bring everyone you know.
So
8th of November, 6 p.m. and we've got a special showcase of
something coming up.
Something and
software.
something. We got a few secrets coming up. Be there or be square.
Yeah. On that note, thank you guys. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you around.
See ya.
Thank you.
See you guys.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Same time, same place.
Subscribe.